dive into our regularly scheduled programming, I'll hand it over to Scott Masson of Digital Hive. Go ahead and share your screen and give us 5 minutes about analytics catalogs.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric. And welcome to the new year, everybody. We're still getting used to 2023. But yeah, I just wanted to start out with a quick, we're going to be talking about an analytics catalog for the next hour or so. And I figured let's kind of level set what an analytics catalog is. And this isn't a product pitch by any sense. It's just kind of, get everybody on the same page of what people typically refer to as analytics catalog. And, one of the things that we see in the market are people that have multiple BI tools. And what they want to do is they want to bring their BI systems together and make content accessible through a centralized access point. One of the terms I hear quite often is, I want a one-stop shop for analytics, right? And when you factor in, analytics takes a lot of different forms. Today you have, the traditional reports and dashboards. You also have things like spreadsheets, which arguably, the BI purists will say Excel is not a BI tool, but it's still one of the largest BI tools out there. So people want to, add to the reports and dashboards by bringing in spreadsheets and videos and images, because analytics really does live everywhere. So what, the kind of initial view for analytics catalog is really, my one-stop shop for analytics. So what you see here is I've just mapped directly to the root of, 8 or 9 different BI systems here. And what happens is the user can actually go in and browse. In this case, everything's secured. So only the user's only seeing content that they normally would be able to see. So I go into Digital Hive into, the Digital Hive workspace in Power BI, and there's all, the dashboards, and if I go back up, and all the reports that the user would have access to access normally through the BI tool itself. Of course, the ability to search, that plays a huge part. So just going in and searching. So I've gone out now and searched across, these 8 or 9 different BI solutions and brought back everything relevant to the search criteria. So really being able to browse content and search content is really what's at the heart of an analytics catalog, right? So bringing together the reports, the metadata, everything kind of pertaining to analytics into one centralized environment is really key, right? And of course, you can add the bells and whistles of different things, like branding and stuff like that, and custom branding. But one of the things that we hear quite often in the market is when you talk to executive leaders, they always seem to have a vision now on how they want this new UI to roll out, right? They don't like those archaic kind of folder browser type approaches. What they're really looking to build, and the quote unquote Netflix for BI, all right? And that's a term I know we've used in our marketing before. And what organizations and leaders wanted to roll out is that Netflix style interface that people have grown accustomed to using. Right? And Netflix is a great way to consume content, all types of content, because it's logically laid out, people understand it. So what I've done here is just I've replicated that, just by having different content lanes, things like, my favorites. So again, this would be personalized based on every user who's logged in, interests, which are subject matter related. We have recommendations like Netflix that actually has, machine learning recommendations based on content that users typically interact with. So similar content to that. And, lastly, a different workflow and, pointing at a physical folder location, in this case, it's the file system, just bring different PDFs to bear. But this is kind of like the next evolution of analytics catalog, where you have these new kind of intuitive user interfaces to surface content. And really the goal of an analytics catalog is to make life easy for end users by centralizing all the content and ultimately driving BI adoption by allowing users to gain access to content that they typically normally wouldn't interact with, either because they know it didn't exist, or they just don't really know about that system altogether, although they do have access to it. And I think I kept it under 5 minutes. So
You did. That's very good. So analytics catalogs, that's a topic for the show today. We're going to be hearing from Sanjeev Mohan of Sanjmo. We've also got Marius Moscovici on from Metric Insights. And for our virtual studio audience here, don't be shy. Send us questions at any point during the show. I will queue those up for the roundtable discussions. And we're going to have some fun today, folks. I think this really does represent a maturation of the industry, quite frankly. We do have data catalogs. Sanjeev will probably talk about that a bit. And data catalogs, again, represent a maturation in the industry. But data catalogs, of course, help you understand like business glossaries. What does this data point mean? What does that data point mean? And analytics catalog takes it to another level where you're trying to give a strategic view of all these different assets across all these different tools. There are lots of benefits you can get from that. one of which is troubleshooting. Why is it that this view of the world is different than that view of the world when it's the same world we're looking at? A lot of times it's filters, for example. A lot of times there's just a data source that's not in one, which is in another. So there are lots of reasons for that, but getting to the bottom of it can help really get productive behavior from your entire team built around analysis. So stand by, folks. You're listening to DM Radio.
You've heard AM, you've heard FM. Now, tune into DM Radio, the world's longest running show about data. Each week, host Eric Kavanaugh interviews the brightest minds in the world of information management. Want to be on a show? Send an email to info@dmradio.biz. Now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to DM Radio. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh here. Year 16 begins in 1 month, folks. We launched DM Radio back in 2008. It's been a wild ride. It's been so much fun to learn from so many intelligent people. And really the whole genesis of this show came about because I realized when I was at the Data Warehousing Institute, in fact, back in 2005, that you cannot have a software company without intelligent people. It's just not possible. And these folks tend to be articulate. They tend to be creative. You have to be creative to write software. You have to understand the language, a business problem, the challenges your business is facing, all these things you have to sort of understand and be able to articulate, and then be able to write code, of course, and manage the product and do all this stuff. And in the data world, that is so powerful. It is so important. I knew 15, 17 years ago how big the data industry would be. Actually, I didn't. I was very optimistic, and it has blown my expectations when you look at companies like Databricks and the valuations that they're getting. It's just through the roof. We thought Cloudera was big when they got $740 million. Now they're getting billions of dollars. Well, now they're not getting too much because of various recessionary pressures. But nonetheless, the data business is not going anywhere. The analysis business is not going anywhere. And the topic for today, where's that report? Check the analytics catalog. We're going to talk about analytics catalogs, what they mean and why they're important. And in a word, an analytics catalog is a catalog for analytic assets. So think dashboards, think reports, et cetera. And lots of big companies will have multiple technologies. You may have Alteryx, you may have Sisense, you may have Tableau, you may have lots of these different tools. I was looking today at all the different analytics vendors are. There are hundreds of them. There are hundreds of technologies that you can use to understand your business. The job of an analytics catalog is to really serve as a repository for those analytic assets to help your people find the right ones. And you could even certify them bronze, silver, and gold in terms of data quality. If you have a gold standard, then you can make decisions on that report. That's the idea. If it's more of a bronze, then maybe it's stochastic. You want to learn more about what the business is doing in a particular space, that's fine. But when you can really collaborate around the assets themselves and make sure your team is looking at the right reports. I mean, there's some research that suggests people in information roles in large organizations will spend hours a day just trying to find the right report. That's not a productive use of anyone's time. We want people reading reports. We want them asking questions about why, what it means, how it's happening, all that fun stuff. That's what we want. We want to be productive with our technology. So we'll be hearing from Sanjeev Mohan of Sanjmo. We've got Scott Masson from Digital Hive and Marius Moscovici from Metric Insights. I'm going to use that beautiful picture right there to take our group photo. So smile for the camera. There we go. And let's bring in Sanjeev Mohan first. Sanjmo is your company. You're a former Gartner analyst and all-around nice and smart guy. You've been tracking this industry for a long time. I really view this as a maturation, as an inflection point. What do you think, Sanjeev?
I completely agree, Eric. We have been living in this so-called modern data stack for the last many years. The problem with modern data stack is that we've had an explosion of products, approaches, tools, technologies, and from an end user's point of view, they don't have the hours of the day to be researching and finding out, should I go with product X or product Y? So anything that can simplify, unify the end user experience is fantastic. I spent, as you said, so many years looking into data catalog as a one-stop shop for locating my data and finding all the associated metadata with that. Analytics catalog is the other side of the coin, where it's not the data, but it's a dashboard, it's a report, it's a one-stop shop. And not only do I find out what reports are available, I can do a search, but I can also see the usage, and I can see all the metadata and see, like you said, is it certified? What kind of feedback do I have from other consumers? So analytics catalog is in the same vein. It's trying to simplify the access, apply proper governance controls on it, and be able to see different views, different reports in the same pane of glass.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, it's all about optimizing your time.
Right.
Let's face it, we have recessionary pressures. Whether or not technically it's a recession doesn't really matter. I mean, you see massive layoffs. I know folks who got laid off yesterday. Frankly, got text messages from friends of mine who are at Salesforce. Lots of companies are laying people off. Well, now that means you're going to have fewer people to do the same amount of work that you had before, which means there's less time to waste. There's less time to spend looking for some reports. So I think this is going to be a real forcing function to make analytic catalogs much more prevalent. And with that, maybe I'll bring in Marius Moscovici from Metric Insights. Marius, tell us a bit about yourself and your company and how you folks are helping move the ball forward in terms of analytics catalogs.
Hi, yeah. So I'm Marius Moscovici. I'm the founder and CEO of Metric Insights, and we provide an analytics catalog, or we call it BI portal, but it's essentially the same thing. And really, we strive to do, very, very much what Sanjeev talked about, and that, it is about creating a single pane of glass to access all of the different analytics that people have, whether that with anything from a spreadsheet that's being shared by the finance team on forecasting, and you want to make sure that everyone's looking at the same version of it, all the way to a traditional BI tool report, or even a data science asset. There's a Python model or a Shiny application, whatever it is, kind of having all that in a single pane of glass. And I think that the value proposition ultimately, from the user perspective, of course, it's being able to figure out, what is it that I can find, and what do I have the right asset, and do I understand how to use it? Data literacy, being able to make sure I'm using the right information to answer my questions. But from the organizational perspective, there is this much deeper value proposition that goes even beyond engagement, which is around governance, right? Because if you look at most mature BI environments, there's just a huge amount of cruft in there, right? The reports have been built out over many years. There are extra reports. Sometimes people send around spreadsheets and things that don't have accurate information. And it's very hard for organizations to effectively govern that content and make sure people are not misusing information. There might be some corporate initiatives around tracking of PII data, et cetera, but if that doesn't make it to the point of consumption where we can monitor and make sure that only the right people are accessing that information, then that governance is not complete. So creating that single access point then enables not only a higher usage of information, because people know what they're using and they have ability to, use it correctly, but it also allows effective governance so that, the organization as a whole can make sure the right people are looking at the information, that the right information is discoverable, and that those assets that are obsolete, that are duplicative, they're not being surfaced, and people don't run into those as they're searching for things that are actually meaningful. And so those are the ways in which I think we and really all the different players in the space really help the customers be successful.
Yeah, that's a wonderful summation, and maybe we'll get an opening statement too from our buddy Scott Masson over at Digital Hive. Scott, tell our radio audience out there a bit about yourself and Digital Hive and how you're pushing the ball downfield for the maturation of analytic catalogs.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, as Eric said, Scott Mason, I'm the CTO at Digital Hive. Been in the analytics space for probably longer than I want to admit, but going on 24 years now. I think we're probably all in the same boat. We've been at this a lot longer than most. But yeah, like Marius said, the analyst catalog, at first glance or first blush, it seems like a simple technology, but it really kind of brings together a lot of different initiatives in the organization. Governance is key, and I'll circle back to that in a second. But there's also, the modern UX, right? People are looking at the next generation UI and trying to move away from legacy, because that really helps, consumption and adoption, driving BI adoption. BI adoption rates have been at the lower 30% probably for probably the last dozen years or so. And every year there's always a focus on increasing adoption, but it never seems to get there. And I think one of the reasons or barriers to adoption is that content is spread out everywhere, and users have they have access to 3 or 4 different BI tools, but they're always going to go to their sweet spot. If they're a Power BI power user, that's where they're going to go, right? And you get this, the data sprawl is another initiative that Gartner's talking about, where you have analytic content everywhere. And if I'm a Power BI user, I'm going to go to Power BI, and if I don't find the report I'm looking for, I'm going to log that help desk ticket and get that report created. But meanwhile, that report might have also existed in Tableau, it might have been in ClickSense at the same time, which I had access to, but I would never think to go to those tools because they're not my bread and butter. Right. So the analyst catalog helps to bring all that content together and stop the sprawl. And not enough emphasis can be put on BI governance. Once you've centralized your access point for all BI content, governance becomes a lot easier to manage. Without that centralized access point, you're investing a lot in technologies like a Splunk or an ETL processes to collect this data from all these different sources, put it together into a central repository, and actually massage the data to actually be able to report on. And that, again, providing the BI tool actually allows you easy access to that data. There are some vendors where the data is very difficult to get to because it's an on-demand spreadsheet or HTML page you have to download, which really doesn't have the information. So being able to funnel everything through an analyst catalog to collect that governance really kind of completes and rounds out that governance story that organizations are striving for.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And Sanjeev, I'll get you to comment on this, then we'll just go around the horn a couple times here. But yeah, I've thought about this for years and years now. And you and I have researched the data governance space. If you don't have a single point of access, you don't have governance, basically. If you have 9, 10, 12, even 2 access points, it gets very difficult. I mean, you can put some control on both of those access points, but if you don't, I mean, it's just like, if you're trying to run a bank, you have cameras over the doors because you want to know who's coming in and who's not coming in. If you have doors that no one knows about, that's when money goes out the freaking door, right? So this whole point about centralizing access, well, it's not new. It's been done before. But I think now, thanks to faster processors, better technology, we can actually pull this stuff off. If you tried to do that 10 years ago, it would have slowed everything down and no one would have been happy. But now we can't do it, and you really must do it if you're going to have effective governance, right, Sanjeev?
Yeah, Eric, you know how we spent a lot of time in 2022 talking about data mesh and decentralization, and I've always been of this opinion that yes, decentralize wherever you can for your business logic, because your data engineers, your experts are in the domains. But when it comes to governance, you need to centralize it. You need to have a common, consistent application of your security access policies, a consistent way of defining your business glossary, so you don't end up with multiple definitions, multiple access points, multiple security policies, so all of that needs to come together. So in my mind, the best approach to doing analytics development is a combination of decentralization and centralization. You decentralize where you need subject matter expertise and it's domain driven. And you centralize when you need to make sure you have a common governance in place. So I agree with Scott. We got to think of governance in a more contained manner and not just give the keys to the house to different domains and then lose control over who is accessing it, who is allowed to see what did they run, and so on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And let's go back around the room here. Marius, I'll throw it over to you. Knowing which reports other people are using pretty important stuff, right? Like knowing, hey, lots of people are looking at this quarterly sales report. No one's looking at that report. Wait a minute. I'm the person who wrote that report. I know it's more accurate. Well, you want to be able to capture that information. You want to have an environment where someone can write a note and say, hey, guys, you're looking at the wrong report, and have everybody see that. I mean, this is just one small use case around the need for this kind of approach. What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think, so that speaks to kind of two things: understanding the usage information, and then being able to also sometimes capture qualitative type feedback information where users can comment on what's working, what's not working, reporting, and that can be funneled back to the developer to work with it. And I think it's critically important. I mean, we've talked about kind of this different siloed approach to governance, and governance is so much more than just about access, right? I mean, as Sanjeev and Scott alluded to, you want to be able to find the right content, and then at the same time, if you have a data catalog, you want to make sure that all that metadata that you've captured in the data catalog is at the fingertips of the audience that's actually consuming the information, right? And that's where with analytics catalog comes into play, right? If I see over and over, we see this in so many organizations, people go out and they pick a data catalog, you name it, Calibra, Elation, Purview, whatever, they go deploy it. And then it becomes this little island that maybe a handful of people will go in and take a look at things, but really no one, I mean, who has, as part of their workflow, to go into the data catalog to find out what that glossary term really means, right? Is there a glossary term on the retail sales, and what does it mean? No one, right? Everyone's working with the reports. And so that what an analytics catalog or portal provides you is the ability to really bubble up and surface and integrate all that information to the point of consumption, right? So that now I'm going to use that Tableau report. I can see right then and there, oh, this is using a term. Here's the definition of that term. Maybe that's coming from my data catalog or somewhere else, or whatever, but here it is. I can see certification. I can see all that. So I've got a holistic consumption experience. And I can not only sort of find and search across all my content, but I can handle this thorny issue of discoverability, right? So if and this is, I think, something that's a universal problem in that, when you build, let's say you as an analyst build a report in any tool, Power BI, Tableau, you then set the security permissions for that report, right? Based on a group that should consume it. Well, oftentimes, maybe you've considered one part of the organization, but you haven't thought about everyone in the organization. And so for everyone else who doesn't have access to that content is invisible. And that causes exactly the problem that Scott described, where, someone's going in to take a look for something, they can't find it, and they go and recreate it, when really that same piece of content exists already, but they just weren't part of the original access list. And so catalogs provide you this, analytics catalog provides you a mechanism to solve for that, because you can surface information, identify things that maybe are not yet accessible to you, but integrate that into access request mechanisms, and thereby create a process in which I can discover that something exists, request access to it, obtain it, and then consume it with, again, all that context of data literacy that I need to know what does all this mean, and so I have confidence that I'm working with it. And so, without that, it's just a Wild West, and it's impossible to govern the environment.
Without that's the Wild West. That's a really good point. That's an excellent summation. This is exactly correct. And these things happen over time, right? I mean, you're talking large organizations have lots of reports, they have lots of dashboards, there are different ways of doing things. And so that long arc of legacy software and legacy process, well, that's part of the challenge that we're facing now. But to Scott's point earlier, we'll pick this up after the break, the new UX, the new UI, that's where you want to focus, that's where you want to engage people. We'll be right back, folks. Don't touch that dial. You are listening to DM Radio.
What if you could own a piece of the future?
All right. One down, two to go.
So I really like what Marius said. It's finding content is one thing, but it's also important to find the context.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk to customers, their big concerns is that they're lacking that transparency. They don't know what I'm accessing, whether it's the right thing, where did it come from, who else is looking into it, what's the usage of this, so if we can provide that piece along with the report, so report is a content and we provide the context of metadata, then that is exactly what data consumers are missing today.
And that's exactly where I was going to take, I assume the conversation was coming back to me after Mario, so I was going to add on to what he was saying about that is part and parcel of an analytics catalog is not just bringing the content together, but actually giving the users the ability to have that trust in the data, or knowing that it's it's an official production database versus, a spreadsheet somebody downloaded off the web and started creating reports off it. Because a lot of those BI tools allow you to create those free-form reports now, right? Of any data source. So it's, So I think maybe we touch on that a little bit more, Eric, before we dive into something else. Just to round up.
I'll throw it over to you.
So so Scott and Marius, you guys are the experts at this. So I'm just curious. Let's say I'm a Power BI user, and I need a certain report to show, let's say, ROI of a certain product initiative, and I go into Power BI. I do a search. I don't find it, but that report may be in Looker, which I don't use. So I have no idea. So I'll just go create my own report. That's the whole idea, right? Like
that's the whole idea. So instead, you'll see that like a little Looker icon, like in that example of what Scott showed you. You might see that Looker result show up. There might be a lock on it or something like that, or something that you can't have access, and then you can click and get through an access request process that gets you access to it. So that's the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And yes, I'll throw it over to. So we're back here in a minute and 30 seconds. So I'll throw it back over to you, Scott, and let's get into the metadata conversation too. Like what kinds of metadata? To Sanjeev's question there a second ago, I know what I want to find. Can I put in a query in one of these portals to be able to get to that piece of information and to understand, right? Search, like the age-old beautiful concept of search, and what people got accustomed to with Google was good search results. Right. I mean, I actually have a theory about all these chatbots, that the reason chatbots became so prevalent on websites was because search on websites stinks. Mm-hmm. It's just terrible. You go to any number of websites, you search, you get all kind of crap like press releases and other things that are not at all germane to what you're looking for. Well, why is that? And it's because there wasn't enough effort placed into getting the search algorithms right or doing whatever. But, that's you kind of look around and see things are happening. Why are things happening? Well, there are lots of reasons, and that's a big one. So, all right, we got 35 seconds till we come back. But that was a great opening segment, guys. Good job. And we do have some comments already from our friends in the audience. I see Robin Rappaport is out there. How's it going, Robin? Yanis is with us today. Lots of people. All right, 15 seconds.
0413 800-289-0413 800-289-0413. That's 800-289-0413.
Welcome back to DM Radio. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to DM Radio. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, here with several wonderful guests. We've got Sanjeev Mohan from SangeMo, Marius Moscovici from Metric Insights, and my other good buddy, Scott Mason, not Mason, I got it this time, Scott Mason from Digital Hive. And I'll throw it back over to you on this topic of analytics catalogs and searchability, discoverability, as we say, and metadata. And I think you wanted to follow up on something that Marius was saying. So go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, Marius brought up a good point about, metadata being co-located with the actual reports and the analytics. And, you talked about tools like Calibra and that, great repositories to contain metadata. But if that metadata isn't exposed side by side with the analytics, it's kind of wasted. Again, you're reintroducing a problem by having users centralize all their access point to analytics. But if they need the metadata, you're making them jump now into another hoop to get the information out of the data catalogs. So it's really kind of the blending together of both worlds that is really required to have a true, robust, solution for your users. But more importantly, that metadata is important because it helps to instill the confidence for the users that the data they're looking at is of a noteworthy or trustworthy source. We were talking kind of in the break that BI tools today become so easy to use that anybody can download a spreadsheet from anywhere and create a report and publish it. And if the right guidelines or the right guardrails, I should say, aren't put around that report, somebody could be making a decision off a report, off of data that, God only knows where it came from. So you need that governance in place to actually say that this is production data, it's a certified report, and it's not off somebody's production or a personal, data system, so to speak. All right, so that's why it's really key to have that metadata side by side with the reports.
Yeah, and you want to understand what's available. And I'll throw this back over to you, Scott, and then maybe over to Marius. But I think, and I'm always using Google Docs as an example because I love Google Docs, right? And one of the things that they've done that I think is very interesting is when you go into documents like what used to be Microsoft Word, basically, you go into that environment and they will automatically place the most recent one you've been working on the top. And so they automatically list them in terms of order that you have engaged with them in. I'm sure you can kind of change those views and the settings and so forth. But what a brilliant idea. Instead of just the old file system where it's just one of many files, because I'm one of these guys that's just saving it to the documents folder and like, oh, good God, where is that thing now? It's very hard to find. This is a very simple thing. So there are simple ways that you can enhance the UI, the whole user experience. And that's what these catalogs do, right, Scott?
Yeah, and you're really hitting on is personalization, right? And being able to personalize your experience to tailor the way and reflect the way that you work is really key to, another key to adoption. There's so many keys, but that is another key to adoption. Just because, I might work in the mindset, I'm used to browsing the catalog and, the folder structure, it's second nature to me. Some people want to see their most recently used folders, right? Or files. Some want to see their favorite files only, right? Even if they're not most recently used. So being able to tailor your view to work, or to better suit how you work is really key to all this as well. And, I don't know many users that are, that want to have that old folder browser type dynamic. We see so many products now that are trying to move away from that. We talk about, product 2.0 or UI.2.0 and things like that, where they want to use new modern controls that have new ways of surfacing up information. And the perfect example, like you said, is Google Drive, Box, things like that are trying to move away from those traditional folder structures that you typically get in archaic applications.
Yeah, well, the legacy stuff is everywhere. And Marius, maybe I'll throw it over to you. What else can you do to optimize the experience so you're getting recommendations to the user that are relevant to them? I've talked with a lot of people over the years, and relevance is such a huge component. It's such a huge facet of success. If you're showing me information that's relevant, I'm going to pay attention to it. If you show me a bunch of information that's not relevant, I'm not going to pay attention to it. What do you think about that, Marius?
No, I think that's absolutely right. And so there's, there's the classic sort of recommendation approaches. There's the things that, Scott talked about as far as just, there are many different small but yet important factors to UI and UX design that enable sort of, an experience that feels delightful rather than feeling cumbersome. And I think fundamentally, though, from a portal perspective or catalog perspective, it's all about shortening that time to value, right? Because you as a consumer, as any consumer of analytics, I'm looking for something in order to answer a question. And it might be, I want to find an analytic I've used 10 times before, or maybe I'm looking for something new and I'm using search, etc. And the question is always about how can we create user experiences that get the user to value as quickly and as efficiently as possible, the minimum number of clicks that retain context. So, for example, oftentimes we hear from our customers, I don't want to go deep into the dashboard unless I know that there's a number that actually requires my attention. So give me a view that gives me sort of high-level KPIs from across all of my different dashboards that I'm using, and then let me see what's in the red. And when there's something I'm noticing that's in the red, now click into that. Now I go into the dashboard and do the deep dive. So don't drop me in a deep dive, because which of these dashboards should I do deep dive in? I don't know. I need to understand the high-level metrics first. So things like this, those kinds of key design principles that go into how you present the information and how you collect this information that go beyond just I catalog it all together, but have to do with affecting the user experience, that they can have a really profound impact on how effective, how sticky you get. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it from a catalog perspective, if I'm looking for something new, then maybe I'll come to the catalog and look for it. But if I'm consuming the same analytic that I've used in the past, a catalog must add some additional value to the user beyond just, making it a place I go to find it, because I know where to find it already. I've bookmarked it already, right? Potentially in my browser. So there has to be something, whether that's like saved filters across different content as you browse through it, whether it's an organization of content, easily flipping through content through, the kind of interface that Scott showed, or the Netflix type interface, or a number of other kind of paradigms that are possible, right? The idea being should always be about getting the user to value as quickly as possible, minimizing number of clicks, and improving upon the experience that they would have had they gone directly to the BI tool from a bookmark.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And Sanjeev, I'll bring you in, and then maybe if you want to ask some questions of our guests as well. But there's an old joke, we may have talked about it ourselves, that in the IT world, you always say one more layer of abstraction can solve all our problems, right? We've got the layer of abstraction of Kubernetes is going to solve all the problems of scale in the future, and analytics catalogs on the top can solve not all our problems, but it sure can solve a lot of problems, because again, you can see into all these other environments. So now you have a new surface area, the single pane of glass, as people talk about. Maybe it's a myth, maybe it's not, but these analytic catalogs can really facilitate getting time to value down from analytics. What do you think, Sanjeev?
Yeah. So, by the way, I do have a question that I've been wanting to ask Marius and Scott, and this has to do with Marius, what you were just talking about kind of notification. I can in a report, I can set a threshold, and I can say if the value varies, goes beyond certain value, then notify me, email, Slack, whatever it may be. But the question I have is, in analytics catalog, can I do it across BI tools? Can I have one rule that checks for values against reports in different BI products and then notifies the consumer if there's an anomaly?
I mean, I'll let Scott sort of answer for his part. For us, the way we do those kinds of rules and KPIs, they are specific to the data set that's present in a particular visualization. So you have to, you connect to this, but what ends up happening over time is you can build up the right KPIs, the meaningful KPIs across all your major visualizations, and then you have this library of alerts that's available to you, both at a high level KPI level, as well as the ability to be able to basically, subscribe to specific alerts and things like that, whether they be threshold based alerts or statistical based alerts. So it isn't like some kind of an automated crawler thing, because a particular dashboard may have hundreds of different data, many different dimensions and many different data points, and you quickly overwhelm the user if you threw all that out at them. But they're usually a specific set of key KPIs that you want to measure from that across a specific set of dimensions that are the most meaningful, the things that you want to bubble up and then drive attention from there, whether the person's in the portal or whether they're being drawn to the portal through some kind of notification, like you said, coming to you to Slack or coming to you. So,
I guess to add on to that, if I guess an analogy would be if you took a spreadsheet, and you probably have many cells in a spreadsheet that help to contribute to the overall picture. If you're only interested in one or two cells, that's the cells you'd create the watch rule for, right? That's where you set up your alert and your thresholding. So you don't need to do it on the entire segment of the data. You can do it on the very specific points that are relevant to your function, your role, or the problem you're trying to monitor.
Yeah, good point. We got a couple of great questions from the audience here too. So let me throw one, and I'll throw this to each of you gentlemen, Marius and Scott, because I'm sure the tools do things differently, but it's a very good question. An attendee asks, when the user identifies a report in the catalog, when they click on that report, does it take them directly to that report? If so, does this mean the BI tool needs to support SSO? Marius first and then Scott.
So you can, at least when we do this configure catalog, I think this is pretty standard in general, but you either can take them out to that tool, or you can have kind of what's called an iframed experience, where you're consuming the content directly within the analytics catalog within an iframe. And most of the time that the latter is what people choose, because they want to keep them in the experience to be able to quickly move between content, etc. And in that situation, it is exactly as you talked about, there are various, it doesn't have to be SAML enabled. There's capabilities to do that with, with Tableau. There's this trusted server authentication. There's OAuth type authentication. There's also the SAML capability. There are a number of different tools in the toolbox that you can use to be able to ensure that the embedding that happens for that content is all sort of transparent, so that there isn't a second login for the user. Because obviously you don't want a situation where every time, once they've authenticated the catalog, they shouldn't have to authenticate to any of the other tools. Otherwise you're straying very far from that experience we described earlier, where it's easier to use the catalog than it is to use the tool.
Yeah, Scott,
Yeah,
go ahead.
For us, our approach to security is we don't want you to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to we don't want you to recreate your security. You have to redo your entire security model. I know if you've had Cognos, you've spent a lot of effort, a lot of money to actually make sure that access control list is built properly and functional. So the approach we take is we will work with any security provider you have in place. So if you're doing single sign-on with Tableau, you're doing username and password with Cognos, and you're doing Azure Active Directory with Power BI, we allow you to work with all three. And if you're doing single sign-on, then nothing to worry about. If you're doing username and password, we let users actually embed or embed their credentials in their profile. We store that in encrypted format. So we do kind of pseudo SSO in the background if they don't support SSO. But like Mario said, we're not going to force you to log into multiple systems every time you want to run a report. That's all done on behalf of the user when they log into the analyst catalog directly.
Yeah, and there are several questions from audience members. And folks, if you want to be a studio audience member, just go to insideanalysis.com or dmradio.biz and register for one of these webinars, and you can be behind the scenes as we record the show. But an attendee is asking, do you still need a data catalog if you have an analytics catalog? So would you deinstall Calibra? I think the short answer is no here, but I'll throw it over to Marius and then Scott to comment on that. Marius, you first.
There are lots of things that a data catalog does that probably an analytics catalog is not going to do, not anytime in the near term. I mean, they're very different purpose. Your data catalog typically will go out and crawl all of the information you have out there. You identify PI data automatically across all your tables, do lineage automatically. So I don't think you should think of these analytics catalogs as a replacement for what you got the data catalog for, if in fact you do have requirements around tracking of PI data, of lineage, of things of that nature. That said, what you're doing is you're not taking all of the information from your analytics catalog. You're showing only kind of that tip of the iceberg. If you think of that analytics catalog as having crawled everything, well, maybe 10% of what's actually been crawled is useful, maybe less, right? And the rest of it is just junk that's accumulated in the database and old obsolete reports and things like that. So the key is to have a solution where you're taking that really valuable things, those glossary of definitions and the lineage for the key objects that are actually certified, et cetera, bubble that up into the analytics catalog so it's accessible to users, and thereby and generate value out of it, is really the key. Now you can you can introduce metadata that isn't in your data catalog into the analytics catalog. You can collect it from different places, from spreadsheets, manually, what that might be. So you don't have to be limited to the data catalog as a source, but definitely don't think of it as a replacement for the data catalog, because it serves a very different function.
Yeah, Scott, you got 90 seconds.
Yeah, the two are very complementary. The way I look at it is a data catalog is a ground up approach, whereas Mario said you're trolling through the table names and the actual tables, whereas the analyst catalog takes a top down approach. The end product of data is the reports. So the analyst catalog starts to troll and catalog things from the output level, and there is a convergence in the middle. And that's kind of where there's a little overlap. But like Mario said, they're complementary, because you want that context, that that metadata about where the data is coming from to help instill the trust in the assets, in the reports that users are consuming. Right? So as long as you can get to the data catalog from the analyst catalog, they're very complementary.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So we've had several questions about that. They are complementary. There's another question that we'll get to in our next segment here in just a moment, which is all around simplification. And one of the attendees is asking, well, wait a minute, if I now have to have an analyst catalog and a data catalog and all my BI tools, like, are we really simplifying things? And the short answer is yes. You want to simplify the experience. You want to simplify the access point is the key, because you're going to have all this sprawl behind the access point. But the key is, can I get to the right information quickly from my governed, fast, efficient access point? If the answer is yes, then you're really getting somewhere. Then you're leveraging the power of your You have your analytics, you're leveraging the power of your data, and you're doing so in a controlled, governable way. That's the future. That's what we want. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You are listening to DM Radio.
Do you need to get your hands on some?
All right. And the hour is 3/4 done.
Time goes by when you're having a good time.
That's exactly
2 minutes
right.
flies by. You know?
Yeah, it's this is good stuff.
I want to throw a monkey wrench into this conversation. Last year, we spent a lot of time talking about data products. We were defining data products and data mesh. We talked about that. This year, we're actually starting to do data products, and a data product may be a report. So what I'm proposing to the market is that there is data catalog, there's analytics catalog, there's a data products catalog, and a data product catalog actually could be a analytics catalog because a report's a product. So I don't know if you've come across this idea. It's just a new concept that I've been thinking about.
I will say that we have customers that are implementing, in terms of doing search and accessibility, they're introduced, we have this concept of external data sets, which are essentially like data objects, or like you said, application objects. And so you're using that to be able to do exactly that, a one-stop, a single door access door, a single entryway to get to all of your analytics assets, whether that be a data product, a data science asset, a report, and have kind of some coherent set of metadata. I think that is exactly where the market needs to go, because I, as a consumer, I'm looking for something and I shouldn't have to look in multiple places. I should just have one place,
Right.
and I should be able to find the asset irrespective of what kind it is. And kind of going back to what Scott said, it has to be, the approach for doing this has to be such where you're not reproducing anything. You're not reproducing the security
Right.
model, you're not reproducing the asset definition. It's just kind of flowing and getting integrated
Yeah.
through the fabric.
And copying data.
No, you're not copying data, all that, right? So that's the key. That I think is a key direction that for sure the industry is going in.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't view reports as data products per se, because they are just, a subset of the data they're connecting to. I mean, you can debate whether it's a data product or not, because it does contain data, but you're not, at most report levels, you're not introducing new data into the stack unless you're doing, a personal data source or the external data source that a lot of BI systems support. So that's kind of where I differ from the whole data product scenario. But yeah, I agree. It's
Yeah.
I'll throw it over to Sanjeev to start, and I'll do that data product thing and let you articulate that point. But go ahead, Sanjeev. Like when we're back, we've got a minute left, a minute and 10 seconds.
You were going to say something, Sanjeev? Or no?
Yeah, I was saying, so a data product is basically taking the report, treating it as a product. So there's new versions coming out. There's a product manager who's packaging it, making sure there's the usage examples, so basically, tactically it's a report, but it's being treated more from a consumer's point of view with versioning and management and all of that. So, and it may not be like a data product in a different example could be a materialized view.
Mm-hmm.
So the product definition is much wider, and a report is just one example.
Right. It's whatever I, as a consumer, need to be able to get to my question. It might be, if I'm going to be writing queries, then it's a materialized view or a table.
Right.
If I want to prepackaged report, then I'm looking for what reports we read, because I don't know SQL and I don't know how to do that. Right. So the point being, you should be able to serve all the constituencies.
All right, here we go. 10 seconds.
3218 800-254-3218. That's 800-254-3218. Paid for by Legal Alert Line.
Welcome back to DM Radio. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, back here on DM Radio. What a fantastic show. Where's that report? Check the analytics catalog. That's our first show of 2023, talking to Sanjeev Mohan of Sanjmo, Scott Mason from Digital Hive, and Marius Moscovici from Metric Insights. And Sanjeev, you had a question about data products. And I know at a certain point, it's a matter of semantics, right? What is this thing? Is it a materialized view? Is it a data product, et cetera? But go ahead and throw your question at our guests.
So the question that we were discussing over the break is that we've got data catalogs, we've got analytics catalogs. Focus this year is being put on creating a data product, and a data product is nothing but bringing product management discipline to an underlying object, which could be a report, a dashboard, or even a materialized view. So the question I want to ask, Marius, let's start with you, is where do you see data products fit in to this data catalog space, the analytics catalog space?
So I think there's a couple ways that I would sort of address the question. First of all, from treating the report as a product as a whole, I think in general that principle definitely applies, and it has to, if you overlay the right metadata to it, and metadata can be, versioning, it can be release notes, it can be user guide, it can be source information, and so on and so forth, right? Whatever is a lineage, etc. That creates it into more of a more coherent product for people to consume. But I think that for sure it should be part of the analytics catalog's job. But I think beyond that, if we think about the different kinds of consumers that you have, there's some consumers that are just find the report. I'm a business user. I just want to find the report that has my number and then move on. Then that product of the report is the right answer. But there are other consumers that might be more of an analyst. I want to do an analysis on my retail sales to figure out why it's not trending so well in the Northeast. How can I find the right data source to do that, right? So that is a question that, you could go just ask that in Collibra, but there should be just a single access point that you go to. You ask and you see not only that, here's a certified data set from Collibra that Collibra is designated as supposed to be the one that you should be using for this, but also here are 3 or 4 reports that have been built off of that information, right? So seeing the having product be a little more of a general idea that includes consumption of data, I think it's very important because it serves a broader audience, not just both technical and non-technical. And even for the technical people, it tells them when they're going to see what data is there and they find a particular data set, if they can see the constellation of assets that consume that, then they're more likely to be able to leverage someone else's work rather than going to have to repeat their work. So from that context, I think it's critically important to do
very well put.
Yeah, I think with that definition of data product, I definitely agree that there is a need. The challenge that you're going to run into, though, is it's all going to depend on the analytics maturity of an organization, right? Most organizations just let's just start writing reports because we need them, and then you end up like Mary said earlier, the wild west of reporting, where you just have reporting assets everywhere. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no management. And then you have organizations that have matured through different growth stages, and they get to the point where they have a BICC or a competency center or a group that manages analytics. And yes, I fully agree. Taking that product management mindset and applying that to analytics is key, because at the end of it, we always talk about data being an asset. It's the new oil. There's value. There's intrinsic value in your data. So being able to manage it like a valuable asset definitely plays a huge role for organizations. Right, and then that's the only way that analytics will mature beyond to where it needs. And we were talking about adoption rates. You're going to get higher adoption rates once you start treating that data, as valuable as it is, and putting the right, the right constraints and the right, guidance around it.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good point. And you guys got me thinking about a topic I've wanted to dive into for a while now. On the discoverability side, there's this great website that came out, gosh, it's got to be 10 years ago now or more, visualthesaurus.com, where you go to a particular word and they show you a plot where it's got this word and then it spins out to all these other ways that it can mean and things that it's kind of related to. I would love to see something like that for dashboards and analytic assets, to see like customer in the middle. It's I can't remember the name of that visualization, but you see all the things it's connected to, and then you kind of move things around and see how that changes things. That interactivity is so important in terms of being able to kind of learn and explore through, because if you're doing discoverability, you're trying to discover something. Maybe I'll throw it to Sanjeev and then Scott and then Marius just to comment on that. What do you think, Sanjeev?
Yeah, I totally agree. The one of the biggest problems is discoverability. It's like, how do I know what's out there? And we've been saying, if my report is in a different BI tool, same thing actually goes for metrics. By the way, the reason why Metrics Store has taken off a lot lately is because we're trying to make it easy for the consumer to be able to detect what metrics, KPI calculations, business logic has been written. And if it's hidden away in some BI product, it's not good enough. And this is the whole notion behind metrics layer. And I find that analytics catalog has a lot of resemblance to what we've been talking about in a metrics layer. And I don't know how. Any thoughts, Marius, on do you see metrics layer as a sort of an extension of analytics catalog?
I do. I think it's very much, it has to be part of that because, again, going back to the same principle, when I'm looking for something, I want to know what, if I don't come at it with a pretext of knowing what's there. So if I have to go search somewhere else to find out what metrics we have, it's a different place from where I look at the reports and the definitions. By definition, you've already lost me, right? I'm either not going to search at all. I'm only going to search in one of those places and I'm going to miss out. So by definition, it has to be a single access point where I can get to all of the, not only the reports, but also the key KPIs, key definitions around things, understand as Eric said, be able to understand lineage when it's applicable. So I can understand what else is connected to a particular asset based on a particular term or tag, or perhaps it can be, sometimes it's corporate objective. Maybe we have a whole universe of content that's intended to minimize churn. Well, I need to be able to find all that together. Here's the metric, here's the definition, here's the 3 reports we have, here's one in Power BI, here's one in Tableau. Oh, and there's a data science asset that we've used to model out churn and how we can improve it, right? So I need to be able to have a way to do all that, and we can only succeed as a product and in general, the analytics as a whole, if we've solved for that. If we otherwise we're just fooling ourselves.
Yeah, like for example, DBT announced a metrics layer. So DBT now is storing metrics, and then you've got let's say at scale, our Look ML is being used to store metrics in Looker. So once again, now you've got all of these metric layers. So if it's kind of consolidated with Analytics Catalog, then you get one-stop shop for your metrics and for your reports. And if it's now integrated with Data Catalog, then you can go to a different screen and you can look at business glossaries and things like that.
Yeah. And Scott, you want to comment?
Yeah, Eric, just to get back to kind of the question that kicked off that discussion thread. You're looking at, we talk about BI maturity. There's also analytics catalog maturity, right? I know Marius and I have been doing this for quite a few years, and if we kind of rewind the clock to 5 years ago, we were talking to customers and having to educate them on what analytics catalogs are, what the value is, what the benefits are. Now we have a totally different mindset with customers who are calling us that they want an analytics catalog solution. They know what it does. We don't have to do that regular sales pitch. Now it's just kind of getting into the can we meet the requirements type thing. So the market's evolved a bit, and as the market evolves, so do our technologies, right? So right now, an analytics catalog, for the most part, you have a Tableau report is a Tableau report, a ClickSense report is a ClickSense report. There's not a lot of kind of interoperability between these different assets today. Moving forward, that's going to play a key role because yes, you will have to have some linkage, some interoperability between these different reports to actually truly provide that next generation of analytic capabilities that end users are looking for.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And one of the things I like about this whole approach too, again, is facilitating the discoverability. And I think about some of the innovations that Google has done and other companies have done in really optimizing search, like suggesting things as you're typing in the keystrokes to analytics report, whatever, giving you some suggestions. That's just one way you can improve this experience. Knowing what other people are looking at, the whole collaborative side of things is so important too. Like lots of other people who are in your role in this company are looking at this report. Are you looking at this report? I mean, there's so many interesting things you can do from, again, this meta layer, this layer of abstraction that is on top of all these valuable assets that you've invested a lot of time, a lot of money building. I mean, goodness gracious, it's very rewarding when someone who writes a report finds out that a key executive used that report in making a decision, you're like, yay, I matter. Like I did something right. It's a very exciting thing. And I think we're getting so much closer now because, again, you have this layer of abstraction. You have this ability to corral all this information and deliver it in a usable manner. Well, folks, look all these people up online. Sanjeev Mohan from Sanjmo, Marius Moscovici from Metric Insights, and of course, Scott Masson from Digital Hive. Send me an email, info@dmradio.biz. You, my friends, have been listening to DM Radio.
In the Know, I'm Andy Solomon.
Hey, thanks so much, Ben. Off to a good start here, gentlemen. That was absolutely fantastic. If you could stick around for 5 more minutes, we could do a podcast bonus segment. Anyone else? Anyone out there? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Is this possibly the last layer of abstraction we need?
The last one ring to rule them all, right?
Exactly.
Hold on 1 second. Let me throw this over. We'll just go quiet for a couple seconds, and then I'll throw a question over. When we'll just go around the room. I'll go Sanjeev, Scott, and Marius. We got about try to target 6 minutes or 7 minutes or so. And yes, I know that we can still hear you, or you can still hear us. I get a note from our attendee here. So hold on, let me go quiet for 1 second. All right, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here on first show of the year 2023 on DM Radio, talking to Sanjeev Mohan, Marius Moscovici, and Scott Masson, or Scott Mason. Scott, maybe I'll throw it over to you, actually, since I pronounced your last name incorrectly again. I keep telling myself not to do that. It's Scott Mason, but it's 2 S's. That's what throws me off, man. You got the 2 S's in there.
It's the French, yes. I'm
We
almost
can always
debating just changing the pronunciation of my name after these shows, Eric, just to might make it easier.
just take one of the S's out. This is
Yes. Yeah.
That's right. You can solve the problem. You two can solve the problem.
Exactly.
One ring to rule them all. Marius was joking. Is this the final layer of abstraction? In a lot of ways, I kind of think it is. And I really like the point you made at the top of the hour, Scott, about how data catalogs are bottom up, whereas analytics catalogs are top down. These are 2 very important views of the world, right? Bottom up is, all right, what is all the way down there in the weeds? Top down is, what do I have? Where can I get to things? Both very important, different purposes, right? We're using the same term here, catalog, so that's a bit confusing, I suppose. But I think it is the one ring to rule them all because it solves the governance problem, it solves the usability problem. As long as those connections from the asset, in my view, can quickly generate the report, can quickly get me to the information, it's going to win. What do you think, Scott?
I'd probably be lying if I said it's going to be the last layer of extraction. I think it's got promise, but there's always new ones. But what is interesting about this scenario here is that we do have all the kind of the whole spectrum covered now, right? We're cataloging right at the data layer, we're cataloging at the end product result, and kind of everything in between. To me, where the market's heading is how integrated those get, where the delineation is between an analyst catalog and where a data catalog sits. I think that's what's probably going to be up for debate or for market share over the next few years. But they both have a place right now, and they both are a solution to the same end. Right.
Yeah, and there was a question from an attendee saying, hey, who's going to win in the end? Are the analytics catalogs going to subsume the data catalogs or vice versa? And, I was at ThoughtSpot's event last year, and Scott Holden, the CMO over there, made a really funny comment. Someone asked him, well, how do you prioritize what your developers work on in the next period of time? And he laughed. He's like, good question. That is the ultimate question, because you only have so many people, you only have so much time, you have to meet user demands, etc. So, are the catalogs of data going to subsume analytic catalogs? I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen, because again, they're 2 views of the world, and they're diametrically maybe not opposed, but at least positioned. But Marius, I'll throw it over to you for commentary.
Yeah, I don't think that we should think of it that way. I think there are going to be functions that data catalogs perform, that they should perform and will continue to perform. in large mature organizations. Now, does every organization need a data catalog? I don't know that they do, but those organizations that do need one, more mature organizations, will still have those functions like the ones we talked about: automated flagging of PII information, indexing of all the information out there, whether it's used or not, and flagging various things that are associated with that, lineage generation, etc. So I think that the way to think about it is, again, really thinking about what is the useful information of that mass ocean of data that you've collected to the end user, to the analyst looking for something they can trust to build an analysis on, or to the user, business user, trying to figure out, what do I have that can help me solve this particular problem, answer this business question, right? So to that context, again, it's skimming the top of that. It's taking the cream, the cream at the top of the coffee, or whatever it is, the top of the latte, the part that you really want to be able to surface to everyone, and bringing that to users. And then thinking of, and in an environment where it is heterogeneous, right? You're going to have multiple BI tools, and they're going to have, each of those is going to have, its own potential metadata, and some metadata will be there, and some metadata will be in the catalog, and some metadata will be maintained in a spreadsheet by users, right? There has to be a layer where it all comes together, right? So whatever you want to call that layer, right? Analytics catalog, analytics portal, BI portal, whatever, right? There's got to be a layer where you can, as a user, go to access. I mean, if you kind of think into the future, right? You can't conceive of a situation where you're asking users to go to 10 places. So for that reason, I think that there has to be kind of a super level of abstraction that goes across everything in your analytics stack, right?
And it is
every single point of access.
It is different target audiences as well, right? The analyst catalog is really meant at the end user, and data catalogs are more, IT basis. And to throw it back to what Sanjeev was talking about before, the data product. If the data product actually data is actually treated like a product, and there is the right rigor around it, the right controls around it, and end users shouldn't have to need to know where the data came from. They should just trust it, right? So they wouldn't need to go down to, okay, what table did it come from, what column name? And we've all seen column names. An end user probably wouldn't know what the column name meant anyways to begin with, right? And into that level. So building trust in the data would come, and if that data product ever actually materialized, which would be great, and that rigor and that governance was there in most organizations, the two would still have a place, but the end user wouldn't be relying on the data catalog too much.
Yeah, right. Final thoughts from Sanjeev Mohan of Sanjmo, 90 seconds.
Yeah, so I have a little bit more complicated response to this. I completely agree that data catalogs and analytics catalogs serve two different purposes. If I have a GDPR requirement that says anonymize all email addresses, I go to a data catalog to find out where all email addresses are, because column names are all different. They call different things. So that's what I use data catalog for. But my problem is that the consumers are already agonizing over how many different tools do I need to have in my analytics environment, and they want to reduce the number of products because they all need to be integrated skill sets, and it's a mess, finding the right talent. So so my thinking is that at some point I feel that a lot of these catalogs should come together rather than be separate tools. So that's just my 2 cents.
Excellent summation. Great way to end the show. Folks, send me an email, info@dmradio.biz. We want to know what you want to know. We'll talk to you next week, and then every week after that for the rest of 2023. You've been listening to DM Radio.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Hey, boy, that was fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you. Thanks for joining, Sanjeev. Thanks, Marius and Scott. Wonderful stuff, man. We're onto something.
Thanks, Eric, and great to meet you, Scott. Nice to meet you, Sanjeev, as well.
Likewise. I hope we stay in touch. Take care. Thank you so much, everyone.
Take care, guys.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.